Something I've always wanted in my Warhammer 40,000 collection is some Harlequins. Harlequins are really weird. For years and years and years, they were just an available unit for the Eldar, but in 2013, Games Workshop decided to make them a full faction. They even got some codexes for fielding an entire army's worth of Harlequins. Harlequins are the weird, funny uncle of the Dark Eldar, or of the Eldar in general, because you've got your Dark Elves on one side, then you got your Classic Elves on the other, and then right in between, you got the clowns. The Harlequins went from one unit for one faction to a little baby Warhammer 40,000 faction all their own. But they haven't really gotten any attention since then. They keep popping up in the lore all the time, and right now in 10th edition, they can be allied into Drukhari, Eldari, or as Ynnari armies, but they are no longer their own army with a codex. I'm not super worried that they're gonna get squatted, I just think that they've been on the back burner from Games Workshop for the last 12 years, with no end in sight. I don't know what Games Workshop's gonna do with these guys, but I know what I wanna do with these guys, and that is have some. I want them in my army, and so I was at the Nova Open in Washington, DC, and I was talking with Archon Skari, one of the best Dark Eldar players in the world, and we got to talking about the Drukhari detachment Reaper's Wager, which is all about bringing a selection of Dark Eldar and Harlequin units. Now, as fate would have it, after that lovely conversation, I visited the Atlantis Games and Comics booth at Nova, and in their previously loved model section, they had a selection of Harlequins. The exact Harlequins that I really want to put into my Dark Eldar list for a pretty good price. The Laughing God himself put these models into my hands, and I don't know what Games Workshop has planned for the Harlequins, but I know what I have planned, and that is to try them out. These are Skyweavers, the Harlequins riding jetbikes, with some powerful shooting and powerful punching and a 4-up invulnerable save. Unlike my glass cannon Drukhari units, these guys can actually tank some damage on the tabletop. The Games Workshop paint jobs are very ambitious with lots of free-handed checkers. I still remember what a surprise it was when the Harlequin range dropped out of nowhere. These minis come 2 to a box. I have no idea how Games Workshop decides how big squad should be. 3 per squad would have been delightful, but I suppose 2 and 4-man squads will save me some points when I write my lists. The bikes are a fair bit bigger than what I'm used to. I have some Reaver jet bikes for the Drukhari, and I remember a friend of mine bringing some Eldar Wind Riders to a game, but these bikes are thick. And they can all take heavy weapons. They can choose between the Shuriken cannons or the Haywire cannons. I'm going with the Haywire cannons on everybody. I got all the bikes glued together, and I think what'll help with this project is doing some sub-assemblies. That is a pretty big bike. It is about twice as big as the good old-fashioned Reaver jet bike, and it is much more comparable to the Venom, the little open-topped transport. And speaking of its similarities to the Venom, these also come with the 60mm flying stand bases, which is kind of annoying. I feel like if these came out today, they would be on the much smaller 60mm oval base, but those didn't exist yet, and so gotta build some big honkin' bases for these, and I have to literally build them because for my Drukhari army, I cast up all the bases. But I'm in luck because I can just use up the rest of this resin. I have been casting up bases like a fiend for my Drukhari army. I start out making the bases out of rocks and milliput, and then making molds with silicone rubber. I have 2 60mm molds. I started by pouring out the resin I need. It comes in 2 parts, and I put a drop of black resin ink in so that the resin will come out of the molds black. This is fast-acting resin, so I need to get the whole operation done quickly. I poured in some resin using a disposable brush to brush the resin into the nooks and crannies, and then I filled in the molds with some airsoft BBs to conserve on resin. I ended up having to make up another batch of resin to fill in the second mold, and I poured the excess into my 28.5mm molds to make sure nothing went to waste. After 10 minutes, I can demold and see how they turned out, and they look perfect. You can just about see the BBs through the resin, but running my fingers over them, you can't feel them, so I kept on going. Casting up another 3, and the 4th I casted without the BBs so I can compare the weights using my scale, and the BB cast versus no BBs are exactly the same weight. My logic in using the airsoft BBs was to try to fill in some of these casts so that I don't have to use as much resin, because the resin is kind of pricey, and I think it was successful. These aren't super big, and so I was only able to get like a quarter of the volume full of airsoft BBs, and it didn't do anything in terms of weight, because airsoft BBs are kind of heavy because they're made to fly further in the air. Overall, I think if I was doing a big pour, like the big 120mm flying stands, I'd be able to get like half the volume as airsoft BBs instead of resin. Although airsoft BBs aren't really that cheap, so it might be a wash. I'm using pennies to save nickels. Leave a comment if you can think of any other additives I can try to put into the resin to make the resin go further. maybe cut up Games Workshop sprue. I might have to try that for my next experiment, but for now, I've got all of my bases done, and I can move on with the build. These bases turned out great, and the excess resin I used to make some more smaller bases so nothing got wasted. To get these bases game ready, I sanded the bottoms nice and smooth, and I didn't even think about it, but the airsoft BBs sanded away just as easily as the resin. Once I had nice flat bottoms, I took some peel and stick magnet paper and stuck these on the bottom so my models would be easy to transport and take to the friendly local game stores when I get to gaming. And speaking of games I'm playing, The Catacombs of the Blessed Dead, the collaboration between EonsOfBattle and Trench Crusade is live now. A new way to play Trench Crusade, foregoing the open trench warfare and switching to a tight labyrinthine maze of subterranean hallways, studded with the bones of the blessed men and women who have fallen in holy war. And not only terrain, we also have our own resin cast minis, the Catacomb Sappers and the Grace of Flesh. The campaign has 5 days left. Follow the link in the description to the GameFound campaign to check it out. Now to attach my bikes. I can put them wherever I want, but I don't know where the crew's gonna go yet, so I need to have those guys built before I can really know where my bikes should go. Each bike has 2 crews, a pilot and a rider. These things are a lot like chariots more than cavalry. These little elves are tiny and they attach very delicately to the bikes, so I'll have to remember to pick these models up by their bases exclusively. To get some variety in the poses, I did some small kit bashes. On one of the Zephyr glaives, I cut it at the glove and then twisted it to get a different pose out of the arm. And I want to give one member of the squad a banner. I found an outstretched arm in the Harlequin troop sprue and I cut off the sword. Then I found this banner from the Drukhari Raider kit and drilled out one handle so that it has a fist that I could slide this banner into. It's really important to fly the colors in the heat of battle. That way the enemy will know what's happening. The Harlequins don't need the element of surprise. I also grabbed a couple of shuriken pistols off the troop sprue and gave these out to the pilots. Once I had all my riders situated, I can get them perfectly centered over the bases, so there's as little overhang as possible. I drilled into my resin bases and inserted some 3mm clear acrylic rods. I cut these to length and then set my riders on top, but I don't want to glue them down permanently. I'll have to wait for the painting to be done first. They do look really cool all assembled though. I won't see them like this again until the very end. I looped around at all my bits, and on the faces I stuck these down to some paint handles, and on the flag I looped around some copper wire to get a dangling rope that I'll hang some extra masks off of later. Now my desk is completely full of Harlequin bits, and I gave everything a black prime, and the masks I gave a white prime. I've got a humongous pile of Harlequin bits in front of me, all sprayed black, and I've got 2 big problems to overcome, and I've been racking my brain all day trying to come up with some solutions. Problem number 1, the Games Workshop color scheme is impossible, or at least incredibly impractical. Maybe if I was painting up one guy over the course of the next week, I could pull it off with all the little tiny 1mm checkerboards, but I can't do it on a giant gaggle of guys. And problem number 2, the Harlequins need to be bold and boisterous, and they need to stand out. But they need to stand out next to my pink Dark Eldar army. My guys are cotton candy pink and blue. What colors could I use to make these guys loud and obnoxious next to my loud and obnoxious Dark Eldar army? I've been thinking it through, and I think I have a solution that is gonna be pretty cool. Harlequins are typically mostly black with some teal and magenta, which is already the color scheme of my Drukhari. I mixed up some dark blue paint and gave all the black prime bits a coat of this, and then I took some phthalo green, which is a very intense warm green color, and it turned the black a very warm black. On all the masks, I base coated them in a desaturated light blue, then I sprayed a darker blue up from the bottom, and then some white ink from above. And while I had the white ink in my airbrush, I used this to highlight some of the volumes in the jet bikes, to brighten them up a little and show off the shapes in the sculpts. I also sprayed white onto the pilots and riders, and I did another coat of phthalo green, which made my bikes much brighter while still being dark and moody, just a little bit more colorful. Now to add in another color. I feel like with the green, orangey yellow colors will look really good. I took some earth brown and airbrushed this onto the metal parts. On the guns, I cut out a strip from a playing card to mask off the bike so I could airbrush this color on. The airbrush saved me a lot of time, and I only had to use the brush in a few spots. I went over all these spots again with a gold color. Golds don't usually color very well, so this base coat will help get the gold bright and vibrant. I took a warm reddish wash and gave all the metal a good washing, and once that was dry, I dry brushed all these bits with some silver mixed with gold. Now I can start doing some assembly, putting the engines on the back and the underfronts onto the bikes to start consolidating this pile of bits on my desk into 4 bikes. Now for the bike fronts. There is plenty of room for some Harlequin checkers, but I don't want to freehand these. Instead, I'm gonna make up some stencils. I drew a grid pattern onto some painter's tape and then started drawing on some diamonds, carefully cutting these out with a hobby knife. I made 3 sheets, small, medium, and big diamonds. And I also have this sheet of peel and stick diamond stencils. I'm gonna use all of these together to make a kaleidoscope effect. I started out using the big sheet and spraying on some thin orange paint to get started. Then I used my big custom checkers and sprayed the orange on, giving it 2 coats to get it more saturated and solid. I quickly whipped up a little sheet of 2 checkers, and I used this to quickly get a couple of checkers on the rest of the bikes. Then I went back to the front and I switched to my medium sheet and did some brighter orange paint and laid this right over top of my previous layers. After that, I moved on to my small diamond sheet and sprayed on some gold. This gold is similarly warm and saturated like the orange and is the same gold I used on the weapons and metal. These shiny checkers will really pop over the orange. Now my fronts are done, I can glue these on. With the bikes all together, I gave them all a dry brushing with some light green to highlight all the edges, and my bikes are nearly done. The only thing left is something all bikes have: faces. I washed my Harlequin faces with a blue wash and then resprayed them with some white paint from above to brighten them up. Then I glued these into position on the bikes. These do look really cool, but they're also giving me some Thomas the Tank Engine flashbacks. I've got my Skyweaver jet bikes all painted up, and I'm very excited to have this unit because it mirrors one of my favorite Drukhari units, and that is Scourges. A bunch of little bat boys all carrying some of the heaviest equipment the Dark Eldar has, the Dark Lance or the Haywire Blaster. And these guys can also have Haywire Blasters. It's a really funny gun because it's only strength 3, the same as like Guardsman las guns. But on a wound roll of a 4, they do mortal wounds, flat 3 mortal wounds. And so this squad on average is gonna do 9 mortal wounds to any vehicle. It just goes right through, and being able to count on that is pretty exciting. Now the Skyweavers aren't quite as good at shooting as the Scourges, but they make up for it in a really interesting way. They interact really well with the detachment. In Reaper's Wager, the whole thing is the wager. Whatever unit has killed something, that half of the army is winning the wager. And so if a Dark Eldar unit kills something, then they're winning the wager and the Harlequins are losing the wager. And so they'll get a reroll wound rolls of 1 as well, which is really nice when you're fishing for those 4-ups on their Haywire Blasters. And until I can get some more Harlequin units painted up, this one squad of Skyweavers is going to be chronically losing the wager. Now, it's a little tricky to pull off, but stay with me. My Drukhari army takes an enemy vehicle down to a small number of wounds remaining so that the Skyweaver Harlequins can finish it off and then they're winning the wager. So then the next thing that I do is use a Drukhari unit who's now gonna have reroll wound rolls of 1. Then they kill something, probably in close combat, and they're winning the wager, so the benefit bounces back onto the Harlequins. The Skyweavers are no slouches in close combat. They got 16 pretty good close combat attacks. So now they're losing the wager. They get the reroll 1s to wound on those attacks, and so they kill something, and now they're winning the wager. So it goes back to my Dark Eldar who are losing the wager, so they get the good benefits. It's a weird dance. I really like how this detachment works because it's kind of a game that I'm playing with myself while I'm playing a game with somebody else. The Reaper's Wager is a really fun one, but before I get to run it, I actually need some Harlequins. And for the crew, I want to keep it simple. These guys aren't as flamboyant as the troop, so I started out doing some sketchy green highlights on the top spots of their skin-tight outfits. And I painted all the metal bits, their shoulders, backpacks, and flip belts in gold, giving these a wash of brown. And you know what else looks great with the brown wash? The nameplates available at EonsOfBattle.com. EonsOfBattle.com is packed with all sorts of hobby goodies, and our newest product is custom nameplates. These custom plates glue to the front of mini bases and can say whatever you want. It's a great way to give your minis some extra razzle-dazzle, and EonsOfBattle.com is the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. This September, we are revisiting our Blood Factory with the Dark Factorum Reborn. This is an epic collection of macabre modular walls that allow for building any shape and size of terrain, like L-shaped ruins and claustrophobic hallways. Within this set is the pulsating power plants, the engorged fluid pump, the digestive pools, all capped off with the deafening screams of the breathing organ. These glistening contraptions blend brutal machinery with fleshy constructs, creating a disturbing manufacturing facility full of unsightly architecture. This terrain pack is fully compatible with our previous Dark Manufactorum and expands it sickeningly. While I was waiting for the red wash to dry, I moved on to their gloves. For the gloves, I want to go with a bright red, starting out with a dark red and then highlighting up to pure red, carefully picking out their fingers. These gloves are the only real detail on these suckers. I gave the gold a dry brushing of silver mixed with gold, and then the pilots are done. Now for the riders. I did the same gold on their Zephyr glaives, putting silver over the blades, and for the banner, I base coated this in a dark red, then started highlighting with pure red using a dry brush to stipple on a transition. I painted the topper with gold, and then looked through my decal collection for something good in Eldar-y. This Dark Eldar piece fit perfectly. I cut out 2 of these and stuck them down to either side of the flag. And I'm not done with that flag yet. I painted up some extra Harlequin masks so I can have a big one as the flag topper and a few others hanging off the rope dangling off the top of the banner. This flag shows the cooperation between Harlequins and Drukhari, and is the Harlequins poking fun at the Dark Eldar, hanging their masks off of their banner. I got the dudes all painted up, I got the bikes all painted up, and I really want to glue them together. I don't prefer to paint in sub-assemblies. I like to see the whole thing in front of me, but sometimes it just makes a lot of sense. Like on these bikes, let me use the airbrush more, let me reach things easier. But I really want to see what it all looks like, but not yet. I gotta do the bases, otherwise I'm not gonna be able to match the best pose with the best base. My Drukhari bases take a little bit of time to cast up, but the painting is very easy. I started out spraying them with a dark brown, and then doing some dry brushing of grays up to white to bring out the details in the slate rock. This is like a black and white underpainting, and I sprayed some phthalo green over top to tint everything. Then I thinned down some dark magenta and glazed this over the sandy parts, and I used the greens from my Eldar bodies to highlight up the skulls. I grabbed my neon pink grass tufts, both big and tiny, and glued these down all over to represent the alien landscape my Eldar are trekking through. Then I finally mixed up some clear epoxy and glued down my bike to the bases permanently, and then I used some thick super glue to stick down my pilots and riders. My first Harlequins added to the collection. 4 Skyweaver jet bikes, a maximum squad added to the army. In a way, I've gotten to have another squad of Scourges with Haywire blasters. And Scourges with Haywire is a little tricky because they only got a 24-inch range, so they gotta get danger close. But these guys don't mind as much getting danger close because they have a 4-up invulnerable save, so 50-50 chance they don't take any damage. And their datasheet ability is -1 to be hit because they're so fast, they're hard to hit. First squad of Harlequins added to the collection, and I've got plenty more in my pile of shame, but I'm actually excited to get those onto the painting desk because this wasn't bad at all. Harlequins are probably the hardest thing to paint in 40K, but if you do it this way, the only really bit of tricky painting was the gloves, the red gloves, and I actually really like how they turned out because it gives them a nice retro vibe. Very different from my Dark Eldar. And the orange is kind of giving a little bit of a pumpkin feel. October's coming up, spooky season. These guys feel right at home. It has been a hot minute since Games Workshop has shown any love or attention to the Harlequins, but I don't know, it's been over a decade, and Eldar have been mattering more and more in the lore. I could definitely see them doing something spicy with the Harlequins, maybe 11th edition. I don't know, but what I do know is the party's over, kids. The clowns have arrived.